Good evening, members. Before we start the meeting, we are not expecting a fire drill. So if there is fire alarm goes off, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. Please switch your mobile phones to silent. Welcome to this meeting and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Grace Watson, the chair of the committee. Can I ask members, please, to introduce themselves, starting from my left?
Good evening, Councillor David Thomas.
Good evening, Councillor Susan Brooke.
Councillor Lorraine Bredding.
Councillor Lorraine Larman.
Councillor Kieran Parker.
Good evening, Councillor Kate Knott.
Good evening, Councillor Matt Cortez.
Good evening, Councillor Nicola Benson.
Good evening, Councillor Alan Edwards.
Good evening, Councillor Sharon Ainsley.
Thank you, and we have a visiting councillor.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Jones and Councillor Wimbledon.
Apologies for my... Right. Can I sign these now then? Thank you. Item 4, Cycling Infrastructure Task and Finish Group. Members, we have before us a report from the Assistant Director Climate and Growth seeking nominations for a cycling infrastructure task and finish group. Ms Parrott, please introduce the report.
Thank you. So you've just got a very short report in front of you that looks at the current conditions around cycling infrastructure provision in Castle Point. Whilst we have some excellent recreational cycling provision, particularly in Hadley, the cycling infrastructure and the cycling network across the rest of the borough, if you're trying to get to work or get to the shops, is fragmented and not particularly great. And members have asked through this committee if they could review that situation and see if they could find ways in which that could be improved. As the lower tier authority, we're not the highway authority, and typically the county council would be responsible for transport infrastructure, including the cycle network. But there are things that we can do as an organisation, both in terms of partnership working with the county council and also in terms of the way that we look at cycling infrastructure as we do regeneration work in our town centres and as we deliver the Castle Point plan. So members of the committee are asked to form a task and finish group with the following terms of reference, which is to engage with members and relevant stakeholders to identify opportunities for making improvements to cycling infrastructure in Castle Point with the aim of improving the uptake of cycling among local residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? No? Councillor Bredding.
Yeah, I've just got one question. Would this task and finish group also be looking at putting in cycling structures that they can be left in supermarket areas, that sort of car parks? Yeah, cycle parking, sorry.
Yeah, it does say that in the...
Absolutely. Cycle parking is part of the cycling infrastructure that you could look at.
Any further questions? Sorry, Councillor Edwards.
Just with the parking review coming up, are we going to be linking those two activities? Because we've got that on our work plan later. And obviously we've also got the stated corporate objective of reducing car use in the borough.
Ms Barrett?
I hadn't thought about it, but certainly there's no reason why I can't have a conversation with the Assistant Director for Environment and ensure that the two are linked.
Thank you. Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking this is for cycling purely for a mode of transport rather than as a leisure activity?
Ms Barrett?
That was my understanding, yes.
Councillor Ainsley.
And why would that be? Why would the two not go hand in hand? Why not do leisure and commuting?
I mean, you could, but they have two different purposes, I suppose, and it depends on how complex you want to make that stream of work. But you do have some excellent public recreational cycling facilities already. They're principally within the ownership of Essex, leasehold arrangements of Essex County Council in terms of that site. And that is a separate issue, I suppose, to what you think about that provision or not, is a separate issue to the conditions around the rest of the borough in terms of being able to cycle for your day-to-day activities. So they're two different things, really.
Thank you, Ms Parrott. Any further questions? No? Members, would anyone like to volunteer to join the Cycling Infrastructure Task and Finish Group, or are you aware of any members who would like to be involved? Councillor Knott.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would definitely be interested in that. Thank you.
Any other members? Councillor Ainsley.
I have actually spoken to Kate. As much as I would like to do it, I'm afraid I just don't have the capacity.
Sonia, the one nomination?
Yes, I think the chair of members can email us outside the meeting with any nominations, and they could come from outside the country as well.
Yeah. If members would like to join the Task and Finish group, if you can email Sonia and myself, and then we can get something up and running and started. Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just double check. Are you going to send that to all councillors who would wish to volunteer? Because I don't think that was made clear.
Yes, I will be emailing everyone, and so
Thank
will
you.
Sonia. Thank you. I'll get there in the end. Right, members, we have before us a report from the Assistant Director, Legal and Democratic Services, asking to set up a Youth Provision Task and Finish group. Miss Law, please introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to set up a task and finish group of the committee to consider the nature and extent of the youth provision in the borough and identify any recommendations for the improvements of such provision. Councillor Bredin has put forward the proposition that there is a current unmet need in the borough for spaces where young people can safely socialise and that the council should consider options for improving its service it offers to address that need. Within paragraph 5 of the report, it sets out the current council provision that we have for young people. Members are aware that this is not part of the council's core business to provide youth clubs or similar provision, and to do so would result in an ongoing risk and other financial implications for the council, which is not set up to manage. Nonetheless, there is an opportunity for the Task and Finish Group to consider what more can be done by the council and to make recommendations accordingly. It's proposed a Task and Finish Group is set up working with the Director of Corporate and Customer, and the terms of reference are number 1, to create a programme of interventions and support for young people within the borough, building focus on areas set out in this report. It is proposed that number 2, it's proposed that the Task and Finish Group should bring its recommendations back to the committee for review and consideration. The committee can then make formal recommendations to Cabinet. The recommendation of this report is that a youth provision Task and Finish Group be established with the following membership: Councillor Bredding as Chair, Councillor Cortez, Councillor Harbinson, Councillor McCarthy-Calvert, Councillor Patchy, Councillor Silk and Councillor Wimbledon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Lowe. Do members have any questions? Councillor Bredding.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I do welcome the opportunity to start looking at youth provision in the borough. One thing that was made quite clear in any conversations we had is that Canvey Island have access to the Yellow Door, and we also have quite a large area through what goes on at Waterside. But the rest of the borough doesn't have the Yellow Door provision or anything like it, and I think what we need to do as a whole borough is work together on this, because I think there is a lack. We do suffer from antisocial behaviour and children hanging around our streets and our high streets. My main concern is that we don't actually approach them to find out what they want from us. We actually tell them what we're going to give them. And I would actually like the opportunity, with a number of other councillors, I think, to talk to some of the youngsters that are hanging around our street and see what they feel they want. So I do welcome everything the council is doing for our youngsters, but we don't go far enough. My other concern is, and I think Councillor Thomas has just said the same, he's just mouthed to me, I would be interested in coming in on this. There are a lot of names that have come to me that want to be involved with this. And while I do think we do need to be able to get the work done rather than talk about it for hours on end, and there does have to be a limit, I would like that those people that have shown an interest have a way of communicating what they feel to the Task and Finish Group as well. So I don't know if that can be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bredding. Any other questions from any members? Councillor Edwards, you need to sit right in front of me so I can see you. Councillor Edwards.
I'm not that short. Just picking up on your point, I think obviously we're in the process of setting up a youth council, but as that progresses, if this work's still ongoing, I really think we should involve the youth council in that, but it's not necessarily. So I think that if we could make that a future point, that would be good. And I am aware of a member of the public who did a significant amount of work on researching youth groups, probably about 1.5 years ago, with a view to bringing them together for an event. I'll have a conversation with them, but with your permission, Chairman, if we could perhaps extend at least an invite to present that research to the committee. I think that could be a step forward and save some time. And one final point, you're just saying we should talk to young people. When you do talk to young people, quite often what they want is somewhere to sit with their mates that's dry, all right? And that's in direct conflict with what residents who live near places where kids can sit in the dry want, because they don't want kids hanging around. Now, we've got to solve that, because, you know, mostly what they want to do is spend time with their mates without adults looking over their shoulder. So it's a conundrum, but I think that should be the goal.
Thank you, Councillor. Those points will be noted, and we will bring it back. Yeah, and we will bring it back to scrutiny. Thank you. Members, I will move the recommendation set out in paragraph 3.1 of the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Larman, thank you. Agenda item 6, update on the work of the Climate Policy and Scrutiny Subcommittee. Councillor Edwards, can I please ask you to provide us with an update on the work of the subcommittee following its meeting on the 15th of October? Thank you.
Certainly, Chairman. So the committee looked at two items, an update on biodiversity net gain and the decarbonisation of council buildings. So on biodiversity net gain, we had options to look at whether we would be providing guidance only to developers, or doing a more substantive piece of work, or doing nothing. Now, doing nothing wasn't acceptable at all. We've all got to make sure that we get the best value in terms of biodiversity gain that we can from any development that happens in the area. So the committee ultimately decided that we'd recommend to Cabinet that we should prepare a full biodiversity report and incorporate within that the measures that we'd like to see developers take, even on smaller scale developments. And in addition, we ask that work that's already been done be continued to complete guidance for developers in the interim, so that we can start moving in the right direction as part of our planning guidance. There is a new burden fund from the government which can be used to pay for expertise to help us develop the biodiversity report, and the actions in that report could potentially have costs for the council, and these will all be reported back to Cabinet when that is ready. We did raise several questions. There are some loopholes in the guidance at the moment which mean that self-build properties are able to escape from biodiversity net gain needs. This requires changes to legislation basically to close the loopholes, but we did flag that that was a concern. And it also doesn't apply to renovation projects. So where there's a fine line between substantial renovation and new build, that could also be a concern. And we weren't able to necessarily handle that locally, but we had the planning team have raised that. It was follow-up consultations with the government on the effectiveness of the legislation. So hopefully that will be addressed by the government. We also looked at the need for this amongst the promoting of green initiatives. Obviously, we're keen to be a green borough, and we would favour, along with the biodiversity net gain, the promotion of tree and shrub planting within the guidance, so that we try and get more biodiversity just by the nature of the landscaping of developments, etc. And we also raised questions about the implications of the new national planning policy framework on biodiversity net gain, and given the constraints that we have in the borough on green space, etc. And there are going to be overlaps and interconnections between biodiversity net gain, the local nature recovery strategy, which we looked at a previous meeting, which should hopefully start to pull these threads together, because there are several disparate elements of policy. We also looked at the work that's been done on decarbonising the council's buildings. It was great to see that through new funding that's available, the council secured funding to actually go out and actively look at our buildings and assess options for decarbonisation. So I think that's a real successful initiative to go and secure that fund, which had never been applied for before. The funding was limited, so a targeted approach on our most carbon intensive buildings has been taken, which seemed like a very sensible approach. And also, as part of follow-up from motions previously put forward by Councillor Waters, we had secured funding for... Sorry, I've lost my place here. We'd secured funding for solar heating on Waterside Farm. And we had a bit of conversation about where there was a clarification needed in the report on whether that was solar PV or heating, but it is heating. That's going to have direct impact, saving approximately £30,000 annually, which is good news, obviously with significant saving in the amount of power and carbon emissions as well. In support of the work that's going on, there are new posts being recruited to help us achieve our objectives. The local government association work that we've recently completed highlighted that there was a gap here. It had already been picked up, and there is work going ahead to appoint somebody to respond to climate issues. They're going to focus on driving forward our climate strategy and coordinating efforts across all aspects of the organisation. We also asked the council to provide more information on the procurement processes that we use to see if we can drive down, as a matter of routine procurement, the emissions that we make, and whether we could mandate reports on the carbon footprint of activities from suppliers as we develop our policies. We don't yet have a robust policy in that area, but there are initiatives underway, and that will only be spurred on with the appointments that are being made. And there is work being done in collaboration with partners across Essex and neighbouring boroughs on procurement policies to achieve digital collection of information that can then be pooled and share the energy usage, carbon footprint data, etc., to better assess suppliers. So it's a positive direction. Heat source pumps and funding opportunities for them. We had questions on that. That is going to be considered as part of the decarbonisation work that's going on, which I mentioned earlier. So we should see options there on, or recommendations there on whether we can get heat pumps, insulation, different power sources, etc. So I think it'll be a substantial chunk of work, but that's good to see that included. And ultimately, hopefully do more work like's been done at Waterside in bringing in different ways of powering and saving things.
Sorry, just you lost the wording. I was just helping you out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for that detailed update. Members, do you have any questions or any comments? Councillor Bredding.
Thank you for that. It really was informative. I think it's been a long time coming, wondering how long it would take for us to tell builders that they have to start looking at heat pumps, solar panels, all the other ways that they should be helping our environment. So I really welcome the report that you're doing. Is there anything in that report to apply for wind farms at all in the area?
We certainly didn't discuss wind farms directly, but Amanda, can you perhaps help us out with that through the chair?
So, yeah, we didn't discuss wind farms. We were kind of looking at the council's operation. As part of the work on the Castle Point plan, there is a requirement in national planning policy for us to consider off-site renewables, so wind farms, solar farms, etc., as part of the plan making process. And we did ask a question of residents as part of the issues and options consultation. So the Castle Point Plan Board will be looking at that matter in due course and making recommendations around both the sites that have been proposed for renewable energy, there are just a couple, and the residents' responses to the consultation on that matter.
Thank you, Ms. Parrott.
Sorry, can I come back? that right?
Councillor Bresing.
In response to that, is that going to feed into any of the work that the task and finish group are doing? Because it seems to be a bit of a doubling up otherwise.
So that's very much a planning matter, which would be with the plan board, and it is very much a borough carbon matter as opposed to an operational carbon matter. The climate action strategy will look at operational carbon as in the council's operation, and it will look at borough-wide how we want to set targets around that. But there is obviously a bit of a time kind of conflict issue going on there around what the timescales for the plan are and what the timescales for getting the climate action strategy done are, which I kind of acknowledge. And that is a bit of a difficulty to overcome over the next few months.
Councillor Edwards, do you have anything to add?
I don't think I can add anything substantive to that.
That concludes this item. Just as well we got a sense of you. Agenda item 7, update on the work of the Tourism Task and Finish Group. Members, we have a report from the Assistant Director, Climate and Growth, providing an update on the work of the Tourism Task and Finish Group. I understand that Mr. Masters, Senior Economic Development Officer, will introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, in front of you there's a paper that sums up the work of the Task and Finish Group to date. So at the February Scrutiny Committee earlier this year, members agreed to form a Task and Finish Group with the terms of reference to engage with officers, stakeholders and partners to scope out the opportunities for promoting and growing tourism and the cultural offer in Castle Point. The group first met in March and subsequently reformed in September following the elections and was chaired by Councillor Diana Jones. As to date, the work that group has undertaken has included identifying and mapping the assets in terms of tourism and culture in Castle Point, also identifying the walking and cycling routes and addressing a question, what would you do in a day with friends and family visiting Castle Point? So we did a consultation with members within the group, but also sort of wider members as well, getting their feedback on those points, which all fed into the work. Within the report, there's a set of data as well, which may be of interest to yourselves, included both in the report and as annexes, showing where the projected growth is for the tourism sector in the borough. So what we've seen in the last 8 to 10 years has been steady growth in the sector. And there's also some projection in terms of the growth in terms of the accommodation for food services and recreation sector. But there's more we can do to create a stronger and more sustained growth with intervention around this. So, yeah, all that considered, the recommendation to the committee was to commission a tourism culture strategy for Castle Point, which would draw out our strengths in terms of understanding what the Castle Point proposition is around tourism, and how we can build on our assets that's been identified by the group, as well as immediate areas for improvement. So the further recommendation from that is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee be invited to scrutinise and comment on that strategy as it develops. So it will be coming back here for further comments from members. That included things like building on areas we looked at, like improving promotion, leveraging the local heritage offer, which we know is very strong in the borough, particularly in our communities, and greater coordination around events and art trails, etc. So we have we have funding for this through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and it's a relatively fast turnaround on that fund, so we'd be bringing the report back fairly soon, but we would be in the process of devising a specification for that, providing members agree to the motion that we proceed with commissioning a study for the tourism and cultural sector strategy.
Thank you. Right, members, if there are any questions, if you want to refer to Annex C, please note it is exempt, so we'll need to stop the live stream. Are there any questions? So we need to stop, yeah. Councillor Ainsley?
Yeah, once again, there was a section in the Castle Point Plan issues and options about tourism. And are the two going to be intertwined? Same question as previously, because I mean I went into some length in the Castle Point Plan, and I thought, why am I doing it again for the tourism consultation? So I mean, you know, one of the things that I pointed out in the Castle Point Plan issues and options was we need a hotel in Castle Point. I don't believe we have one. Certainly on the mainland. On the mainland, we don't have one, no.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Are we moving on?
Yeah, so most definitely that those two do come together, and the way that you can prepare the plan leaves space for a tourism strategy to be developed, because when you're talking about tourism, it's not just about land, it's also about activities and events and the way that communities do things, the way that businesses do things, which is entirely separate from land use. So we can make sure that the land use elements are in the plan, but the tourism strategy will very much then deal with that broader picture.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Thank you. Is that noted, members? That concludes the item of this business. And the last item on the agenda is agenda item 8, work plan. Members, the updated work plan has been circulated. Are there any questions? No questions. Thank you, members. The work plan will be updated for our next meeting on the 27th of November. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all for your attendance. Meeting closed at 7:33. Thank you.